and that kind of bore itself out in the game. But yeah, that queen 8 is kind of a tricky idea. Okay. So Onibushu against G-Pack, I'm going to save for Friday. Zwish and Llama Lord I will save for Friday as well. Okay, I Seek and Nime. So set white name I Seek, or I guess he's Seek 1337. Set black name Nime 64. Okay, so it was kind of a short one. So it went d4, d5, knight f3, knight c6, Chigorin, c4. Okay. So if you're going to play this version of Chigorin, like usually what you play is you play c4, then knight c6. Against knight f3, it's not really recommended. You should play knight f6 probably, because c4 is really strong. And now, the only way to play this, to continue this position, is to play bishop g4. It's the only move. And then the idea is cd5, bishop f3, gf3, queen d5, e3, and e5. So this is actually a line. Magnus has actually played this before as black. But this is really the only way you can play this position. Because after knight f6, instead, well, now you're actually almost lost. If queen takes, which is actually better, knight c3, queen a5, bishop d2, it's just like a bad Scandinavian, basically. Because in the Scandinavian, I trade the e-pawn for the d-pawn. Here I'm trading a c-pawn for the d-pawn. So I have two central pawns, and your queen sucks. So I'm just going to play like e4, knight b5. This is really bad. But it's better than what happened in the game, which is knight takes d5. Big mistake, because now e4, knight b6, and knight c3 was played, but d5 is actually even stronger. Because if you notice, this knight actually has no place it can go. Can't go here, can't go here. If knight to b4, I can just play a3 at the very least. Force you to go knight a6, which is really awkward. So knight b8 is best. And then a4, just threatening a5, because this knight has to go up to d7. So a5, and now bishop e3. And this is just really good for white. Up development, more space. It's hard to break this. Bishop e5 is always lurking. You can never really play c6, which is just good. But instead you play knight c3, which is a little bit more tame. Okay, bishop g4 was good. e5. Okay, so here you could do two things. You could either take on f3 first and play knight e5, or you can actually just play knight b8. You can actually just play knight b8. Because the idea is you kind of just want to play like g6, bishop g7, and castle. And just do it that way. And then maybe your knight gonna repurpose itself to c5 or to e5 eventually. And then this knight can maybe repurpose itself to c5. Or maybe even to d6, depending on how it goes. But yeah, at this point you kind of have to just cut your losses. But he played knight e5. And now, do you guys see white to move and win? Do you guys see white to move and win? So you can actually take on e5 here. Bishop takes d1, only move. Bishop e5 check.
Check.
And now there's a couple of things you can try. If c6, d takes c6. And this actually wins the queen. Because there's actually no way to stop the dual threat of either c7 check or c takes b7 check. So the queen actually has no place to go where it can defend this rook and also defend against these. So for example, if queen b8, c7 check. Is actually just mating.
Checkmate.
If queen c8, then c takes
Check.
b7 check, and now you have to either interpose your queen or lose it. If queen c7, now the problem is you're not defending this. So I can actually play check. And this is actually
checkmate.
Mate. So again, you have to interpose somehow. Like you have to do this or something.
Check.
But if you interpose this way, I can actually do this.
Check.
Because now your queen is no longer defending this. So everything is bad. Everything is bad here. After c6, b6, dc6. You have to play a6. But now I just play c7 and take your queen.
Check.
And just bishop e3. Double attack. Of course I could take on d1 immediately. But bishop e3 is even stronger. And I'm just up a piece here. Because I'm going to win a piece somehow. So you're going to play like knight d7. I'll take, you'll take, and I'll take. And I have 2 pieces, you have 1. So the only other thing black can try is after king takes d1, bishop e5, check to play knight d7. But of course, after knight d7, just take, take. And now material is, I'm up a piece. White is up a piece. So if you take here, I'll take here, up a piece. And if you move your bishop someplace, say h5, I can just move my knight. And again, up a piece. So knight takes e5 just wins a piece. Because the queen sacrifice is very temporary. A very temporary queen sacrifice. Okay, but white missed this. And just play bishop e2. Okay. Oh, sorry. So d5, knight e5. So yeah, always be on the lookout for that type of thing with bishop e5. But bishop e2 is played, knight takes f3, g takes f3, bishop h3, bishop f4, c6, queen b3. Okay. So here black probably has to play e6, and then just try to hold on here. G1 and queen e7. Just kind of try to hold on. So the idea here is you want to play f6 and e5. Or e5 right away, actually. So for example, if rook g3 to try to win this bishop, e5, bishop moves, and then you can play bishop e6. And black's kind of holding on. But, oh, shoot. Okay, well, let me input the game again. It's not too long, so it's okay. Okay, so knight takes e5 again. So bishop e2, so knight f3,
check,
gf3, bishop h3, bishop f4, c6, queen b3. Okay, so yeah, he took on d5 instead, and now white actually played a very good move here. White played rook to d1, excellent move. So no need to take this immediately. Increase the pressure first. This pawn's not going anywhere. And so relatively best for black here would be to play d4, just try to keep it locked up. But bishop e5 check, knight d7, and rook takes d4 is very bad. This piece is defended, but you're very, very constricted as black. Okay, instead he played e6. Problem with e6 now, though, is that this bishop is trapped. This bishop is trapped. So rook g1 actually kind of just wins the bishop. You have to go like bishop c5, rook g3, queen h4, queen b5 check, fork. So knight d7, queen takes b7, hitting this.
Check.
This is all kind of forced, and I'm just up a rook. Just up a rook. So rook g1 would have been good. Okay, but he played knight b5 instead. So rook c8 kind of forced to stop this. Knight a7, rook c5, knight b5, knight d7. And okay, black is kind of holding on at least here. Maybe if he can get castled, he can be okay. Much worse, but holding on. But instead he played bishop e7. And now this is over, knight c7. And he played queen takes e7 and just resigned. I mean, king f8's best, but...
Check.
Knight takes a8, queen takes a8, and rook g1, e5. e5 is forced, by the way, so that your bishop has an outlet. Bishop takes e5, threatening this. Gotta play like f6 or something. Bishop moves back, and then you get your bishop out. Something like this. But, I mean, white's just up the exchange and has a dominating position, so... But black resigned. So black kind of played the opening rather indifferently. And then when he had a chance to kind of fight back, he didn't take his opportunity. And white missed a couple of tactics, but was never really in any danger. Okay. So the next game we'll go over is Lil Cake against Sacco Bigfoot. So So little K, sack of Bigfoot. Okay. So E4, D5, D5, knight F6, so Scandinavian. Okay, white played G3 here, which is not a good move. The reason why this is not a good move is Queen D5. And now Queen F3, Knight C6 is strong for black. Because black has 2 pieces developed, white has none really. You don't really count the queen. So this is actually just good for black. And if you play Knight F3, Bishop G4, whoops, sorry. Yeah, if you play Knight F3, then Bishop G4, Bishop G2. If you play Bishop E2, play Knight C6, Knight C3, and Queen H5. H3, I can just play E5. Notice you can't take, and you can't castle either, so you're very bottled up here. Black is doing good. So Bishop G2. But now Queen E6 check, and this forces King F1. Because of Queen E2, then Queen takes, King takes, Knight C6 is strong. Knight D4 is threatened, Knight B4 is also an issue. And this pin is very hard to get out of. So it's kind of an opening inaccuracy to play G3, just because of, you kind of have to, I mean, you know, this position after King F1 isn't terrible, but
check.
You'd rather avoid it if you could help it. I mean, because you're going to play like H3, King G1, King H2, but black is definitely okay here. Okay, so here after, here, I mean, you can either play Knight C3, you can play D4, but G3 is a little inaccurate. Okay, but the black played C6, which is actually not an unreasonable gambit. Not an unreasonable gambit. Okay, so DC6, Knight C6, Bishop G2, E5, Knight E2, Bishop C5, castle, Knight BC3, A6. So here either Bishop to G4 or Rook to E8 makes sense. A6 is kind of a waste of a move. There's no real need for it. So developing another piece is recommended. But he played A6. Okay. So I mean, black has actually some compensation here. He has some open lines for his pieces. And white's not really completely developed yet. He'll have to play like D3. And white has a solid position, but black definitely has more activity. You know, F2 could become an issue. After, you know, like a potential Queen B6, Knight G4 idea. But okay. So you play D3, Bishop G4. Okay, so here as white you want to trade pieces because you're up a pawn. So Bishop E3 makes sense. And then after Knight D4, just H3. And white's fine. He played instead A3, which is kind of in a similar vein to A6. It doesn't really do anything. Because you don't want to play B4. The problem when you play B4 is that you create weaknesses on the C file. Because this pawn is a target when this rook comes to the C file. But when your pawns are kind of on their original squares, it's easier to defend that pawn because you can always go potentially C3. But when you push your pawn to B4, now all of a sudden C2 is less able to be defended, and so is C3. Because now you don't have a B pawn anymore, and your D pawn already pushed. So you just have to be careful about creating these unnecessary weaknesses. It just gives black more avenues of attack. Because right now, you know, he's kind of looking at F2, but he doesn't really have much else. He has this open C file, but there's not much else to attack on it. But once you play B4, all of a sudden there will be. And so if you shouldn't play B4, then you shouldn't play A3. And so A3 is a mistake. Knight D4, and now B4 compounds the mistake. Should play H3. So if Knight F3,
check.
Just King H1, Bishop H5, G4, Knight G4, Bishop F3 wins, HG4, or Bishop G4, Bishop G4, and now, okay, now crazy line. So you can't take, because if take, this is actually really good for black. Queen H4 is mating. But you can play knight to G1. You can play knight to G1. And so the point is, after take, this knight's trapped. So black has to find knight H2, threatening the queen. But after knight H2, I can just play H takes G4, knight F takes G4, and knight H3. And now I'm defending F2. This knight is stuck. This knight is stuck. You could play Queen H4, but I can just play Queen E2. I'm defending this. I'm going to play bishop e3 soon. I'm going to play knight e4 soon. I'm just up a piece. But knight g1 is necessary. Also attacking this piece 3 times. So knight g1, knight h2 hops. And if bishop e6, just bishop g5. And if bishop f3, I can just take and go king g2.
Check.
In all cases, white's fine. But yeah, the only tricky line is that knight f3 line.
Check.
And then again, the bishop has to stay on this knight. And then g4 actually wins a piece, but you have to be careful why. Because knight takes, or bishop takes g4, you gotta find knight g1. Yeah. So anyway, that would have been good, but he played b4, which was bad. Bishop a7. And now, again, this kind of weakness tells, because knight's on c2. So bishop e3. Okay, so probably black should just continue development. Queen d7, get on this diagonal, put the rooks on c8 and d8. But he played knight f3 check.
Check.
King h1. So he shouldn't really go in here unless he needs to, because now h3 is threatened. And this h3 g4 idea from before. So bishop d4 was played, but again he has this h3 idea. So bishop takes e3, f takes e3. Or sorry, if you take on e3, I take on g4. Take on g4, take on e3, take on e3. Queen c1, knight f1, and bishop takes f3. And the point is this knight's trapped. So white has 3 pieces for a rook, which is good. And the other variation is, okay, hg4, knight g4, fe3. So he can also play knight fh2. But again, here, just knight d5, queen g5, trying to get here and mating. Rook f5, queen h6. So rook f5 works because of take, knight e7.
Check.
So queen h6 and just king g1. And now these knights are stuck again. And white's just up a piece. So this h3 kind of wins a piece in all variations. Because if you go here, I can just go g4 again. And now if you take on g4, I even have knight to g3. And everything's hanging. So okay, so he took on d4 though instead, which was a mistake. ed4, knight e4, rook e8. And now again h3, knight e4, d4. So if bishop h5, now you have knight f4, winning a piece. So after de4, you have to play queen f6. Point being, if pawn takes bishop, queen
Check.
h6 mates. This is mate.
Checkmate.
So queen f6, and I don't take on g4 though. I just play knight f4. So again, I'm threatening the bishop because I can play knight h3 to block. I'm also threatening the knight. So again, you have to play this weird knight h2 move. So I can't take the bishop, I can't take the knight. But after knight h2, again, I can just play h takes g4. And queen takes f1. And again, I have 2 pieces for a rook. But I'm also up a pawn. So this is really good for white. So So h3 was a good move. Just wins a piece. But instead he played knight takes f6. Oops. Yeah,
Check.
now black is in the driver's seat. This knight's a monster. So relatively best here for white would actually be h3. So the idea again is if bishop here, can't play g4 because of take queen h6
Check.
mated again. But if bishop h5, you can again play knight f4. And this is good. So black has to find the paradoxical knight to g1. Knight to g1. So the point is now if you take on g1, I can take on e2. But h takes g4, knight takes e2, bishop takes b7 is good for white, because you're just up a pawn. And your king is actually safe now, because it has g2. So you just want to avoid rook b8, bishop g2, because again, this is going to be mate.
Check.
This is mate.
Checkmate.
But if you just move your bishop anyplace else, say e4, threatening king takes e2, you're fine. So yeah, h3 was good again. And if black doesn't play knight g1, white's just winning. So after h3, white's better, but instead white played knight takes d4, which unfortunately is a bad move because knight takes h2 is strong. f3, knight takes f1, queen takes f1, queen takes d4, f takes g4, queen takes g4. And yeah, white's just down the exchange now, but black's rooks are very strong, so this is bad news. This is bad news. So now, let's see. White actually manages to come back in this game, so let's see how that happens. Bishop takes b7, so he needs to save this pawn. And so probably the best way to do it is actually queen f4 and trade queens, because this pawn's kind of hard to stop or to defend. You don't really want to waste your rook defending this pawn. I mean, you have to, but it's a bad use of a rook. And you know, these pawns are kind of dangerous, supported by this rook. So queen trade is actually not the worst for white. But he took on b7. But after, so queen h5 is actually the best.
Check.
King g1, rook e2 is deadly. Bishop g2, queen e5, rook c1, queen e3.
Check.
King h1, queen h6.
Check.
King g1, queen d2. Threatening rook takes g2 because of queen takes c1. So you have to go rook a1, and now rook f8. And white's kind of in zugzwang. I can just take on c2 whenever I want. Oh no, I have to input the game again. Okay, well let me just actually get to the key position that I want to show you guys where white actually had a chance. Sorry. Okay, any questions while I do this? Haven't been reading the chat too much, but you guys seem enthralled.
Check. Check.
So this is all forced, by the way. Okay, so bishop takes b7, rook a7, bishop e4. So again, just take here. Why not? Okay, so king g2 to defend the pawn probably, but queen f2 instead. g6. So he should play rook e6 with the idea of rook h6. g6 is not really what he wants to do. c4, f5, bishop f3, queen h3,
check.
King g1, rook e3. Okay, so here, why not b5? Why not b5? Just try to get your pawn to b7. Because you get your pawn to b7, it's actually hard for black. Because he always has to babysit it. He always has to babysit it. So, okay, he played c5 instead. And now queen g5, or... Oh, sorry, I missed a move. I missed a move. He played d4. Yeah, he played g4. So yeah, b5, just to try to get this pawn as fast as possible. Okay, so queen h6, c5. Okay, now queen g5 is strong. The idea is that you simply want to play rook here and rook here. And so king f1, rook d3, rook d1, rook takes a3 is good. But he played f4, g takes f4, rook d3, c6. Okay, so now there's actually only one way to win. There's actually only one way to win here for black. It starts with queen h3 to hit the bishop. Bishop g2, queen g4 pin. c7, rook c3 hit the pawn. Rook e1. So now you can't take the pawn because I can take your rook. So rook f8 forced, rook e7, rook f7, queen e1, rook c2, saving the rook, rook e check, rook f8, queen e6,
check,
take, and take. And black should be winning this. These pawns are weak. Okay. But after black's move, which was queen g7, now it's actually draw. Rook c1, queen c7, whoops, queen c7. And now bishop g2, rook f8, rook f1, g5, f5, rook f6, rook e1. This is just a draw. Because if black ever tries to do something constructive, these pawns start pushing. D5 can happen whenever white wants. And these pawns are really hard to stop. These rooks are basically stuck blockading pawns. White can't really make too much progress either, though, because his king is very unsafe. But this is actually just a draw. But he didn't play bishop g2. He played d5. Unfortunately. Hanging this. So yeah, if he just plays bishop g2, it's just a draw, because he can get his pawn to d5 by force. But he played d5, queen takes f4, now it's over. Because there's no check here now. There was a check before, but there's no check here now. So this queen is fine. So he played c7, but then he hung all his pieces, and then...
check.
Yeah, so white resigned. So black kind of managed to outplay white in the middle game, but white still gave himself a chance in that endgame until he hung his f4 pawn. He can't take better care of that pawn. It's kind of the key to saving his king. Okay, so Llama Lord against Railbird, I'll probably save for later as well. I'll probably save that for later as well. Let's see. What other game can I do? Okay, Nime and Mimstar I'll also save for later, because that was actually fairly well played. Okay, let's take a look at Neo and Martian Critter. Alright, so set white name. Neo, oops. Set white name, Neo. Set black name, Critter. Okay. So d4, knight f6, c4, g6. Okay, king's Indian. Knight f3, bishop g7, knight c3, d6 is all main line. e4, castle, bishop e2, e5. Okay, bishop g5 is a move. Knight bd7, castle, h6, bishop h4, g5, bishop g3. Okay, so knight takes e4 is actually not a good move. The move to play here is to play g4, and then take on d4, and then play knight h5. So now you have ideas of posting up and down e5, maybe playing f5 at some point, taking on g3 as well. But knight takes e4 is actually a mistake. Because knight takes e4, okay, you're winning your piece back, but not in favorable circumstances. So f5, the idea is you're threatening this and f4. But there's actually a way to refute this. So do you guys know how to refute this? So the idea is that you want to be able to recapture on d5 or on e4 with the queen. And the way to do that is to open up the queen's access to d5. So the way to do that is to play d takes e5. So the point is, after like take, you want to play queen d5 check and take on e4. So d takes e5. So okay, if d takes e5, just h3, saving the bishop. So if f4, you just save the bishop. So you gotta take on e4. And then I just play queen d5 and queen takes e4. This is better for white. Much better for white. Open d file, weak the e pawn. Okay, so after d takes e5, if you play f takes e4, well again, I'm gonna play queen d5 check, king h8, and queen takes e4. And again, this is much better for white. Open d file. So you win your piece back, but in unfavorable circumstances. But d takes c5 needs to be played. So knight c3 instead. Not quite as good because now this is kind of equal. Maybe even black slightly better. Okay, so in this position, black is really kind of threatening to play g4 because his knight doesn't really have a good square to go to. It doesn't really have here because of the queen. And it can't go to d2 because of this pawn. So it has to go to e1. So you want to try to prevent g4 before undertaking anything of your own. So h3 is probably necessary. Black played queen d3 instead. After which black should have played g4, knight d2, and knight b6. Just getting the bishop out. Threatening bishop f5. The queen is actually surprisingly short on squares. Can't go anywhere on this rank, and can't go anywhere back here. So yeah, g4 just kind of takes away all these key squares from white's pieces. But instead he played knight f6. And now correct was rook f e1, because after c6 he can play bishop to d1. With the idea of bishop c2. And controlling that diagonal. But he played knight e4 instead. Knight takes e4, queen takes e4, bishop f5 is strong. So now the queen really only has two squares it can go to. It can't go anywhere this way, can't go anywhere this way, can't go this way. So it can only go here or here. So if you're going to move your queen, you might as well win a pawn out of it. So queen takes b7 is definitely the better choice. So rook e8, rook a e1, rook b8, queen d5 check.
Check.
Bishop e6, queen a5. So this is still really good for black. Rook takes b2. And if queen takes a7, well, I can even just play like queen b8, and these rooks will be strong, and two bishops. So even though white's up a pawn, black's actually better. But yeah, you gotta take the pawn because queen d5 check, king h8. Now this queen's kind of feeling pressure. So probably queen a5 is best, just to get your queen out of there. But you might as well have taken a pawn if you're going to do that. And then g4, knight e1, bishop takes d4. And black's just up a pawn. Okay, so he played knight d2 instead. But now g4 is really strong. So the main point of g4 is just to take away the square f3 from the queen. Because c6 actually would just win the queen, right? The queen's actually trapped. Can't even go to a5 now. So g4 threatens to trap the queen. And again, queen takes b7 is bad because of rook b8 and rook takes b2 with a skewer. So he played c6 right away, but allowed queen f3. Bishop takes c4 just wins the pawn. Bishop d3 just to trade pieces. Remember, again, when you're facing the two bishops, you trade a set of bishops. So bishop d3 was a good move. If g4, queen takes f4 is actually winning for white. Fork. So bishop d3 is good. But instead he played rook ac1. Now bishop b2, queen h5, queen f6. And here white resigned. So he was going for bishop takes c1, queen takes
check.
h6, this shenanigan. But after queen f6 he resigned. He's only down 2 pawns. I mean, it's not really catastrophic, but I mean, he's definitely much worse here. So white resigned. Okay, we'll take a look at Zwish and Hakov now. This was kind of a short game, but it deserved a better fate. Deserved a better fate. Okay. So it was queen pawn d4 c6, c4 d5, knight c3, knight f6. Okay, so bishop g5 is not really a common move here. There's really no point to play bishop d5. Like, there's no e6 in, there's no g6 in. So this is actually a bit of a theoretical mistake. The reason is after dc4, a4, h6, bishop e6, ef6, this is actually fine for black. So the most common moves after on move 4, of course, are either knight f3, e3, or cd5. But bishop d5 is a little inaccurate. So dc4, a4. So yeah, Hakov played this correctly. h6, bishop e6, ef6. So yeah, so white now, Zwish has to play e4. Only thing to play. then bishop b4, bishop takes c4, and castle. And I think black is just fine. I mean, these central pawns look aggressive, but they actually are subject to attack. I mean, f5 is coming quickly, rook e8's coming. So black's doing fine here. But instead he played e3, which is kind of more tame. And now, I mean, black can simply keep his pawn with bishop e6. Bishop e6, knight f3, bishop e4 seems fine. If there's no knight g5, obviously. And it's hard to attack this pawn again. So yeah, I mean, e3. See, the problem with bishop e6 on e4 is that you can play d5. And now just take on c4. But by playing e3, now bishop e6 is just winning a pawn. This pawn is quite safe. Excuse me. But instead he played queen b6, which... So he's trying to trade this pawn for this pawn, but it's actually a bad idea because this queen gets really misplaced. So bishop takes c4, queen takes b2 is correct. Knight ge2, queen b4 is correct. Queen d3. And now he should give his queen an escape square on d6. And play bishop e7. So that when this rook eventually comes to b1, he can play queen d6. But he played bishop d6 instead, which is a mistake. Because now the queen has a harder time getting back into the game. Castle, castle. Okay, so now rook fb1 is probably quite strong. Queen a5, knight e4, bishop e7, you have to waste the tempo anyway, and knight f4. All of white's pieces are great, at the cost of a pawn. Knight g6 is threatened as well, potentially. But he played a5. Bishop c7 was good, now getting his queen here. Rook fb1, okay, now he got his queen to d6, which is good, threatening h2. Knight g3, and actually black is just fine here. It's just equal. So what should black play here? Well, if you, again, realize what white's threatening, you can figure it out. White wants to play e4 really badly and kind of steamroll him with his pawns. So f5 makes a lot of sense. Controlling the e4 square. Again, this knight's pinned, so knight takes f5 is out of the question. And you can follow this up with g6 and just get a nice solid pawn structure. Maybe hop your knight into f6. Everything is fine. Unfortunately, black horribly blundered here with b5, which kind of loses instantly to a little thing I like to call en passant. And the problem is this rook is undefended, so I'm threatening a fork of a fork. So I'm threatening this, but I'm also threatening this. So if you move your bishop, I can just play b7, win a piece. And if you take, I can just win a piece, a rook. So he tried bishop takes b6, rook takes b6, a takes b6, rook takes a8, and b5, but this wish kind of ended the game elegantly. Bishop a2, bishop a6, knight c4 good, queen c7, and knight takes f6 strong
Check.
move. Gf6, and this bishop allows you to play
Check.
this. Check.
Check.
And this is mate. In one move. You can
Check.
stave it off for a move, but still mate.
Checkmate.
Or mate.
Checkmate.
So yeah, Zwish kind of played a little opening inaccuracy, but Hakov didn't really take advantage of it. And then Zwish just got a better position, and then Hakov blundered. Gotta always look out for those en passants. Okay, Alex and Bovi, I already analyzed that on Alex's stream, so I won't go over that one. Okay, Romeo and Little K, I'm gonna go over on. I'll go over on Friday. Okay, Bad Indigestion and Martis I'll go over on Friday as well. That game was super interesting. Up and Comer 15 Hats also Friday. That game was super interesting. So let's see, maybe I go over one more. What did I skip over? Okay, I guess I can go over Nime and Mimstar, because that was actually, it was a pretty well played game, but it was kind of simple. So we'll go over that game as the last game. So set white name Nime 64, set black name Mimstar. Okay. So let's just look at this one real quick, and this will be the last one. Okay, so e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. So she played the Steinitz, d6. So d4 is kind of like the most common move here to take advantage of it. Threatening d takes e5 because this knight's pinned, but knight c3 is not terrible. Bishop d7. Okay, so now here you really have to play d4. Because if you play d3, it's just kind of a passive setup. And I think black is just fine here. So bishop e7, bishop e3, knight f6. See, you end up playing d4 anyway, so you kind of wasted a full tempo. So you should play d4 to start with. e4, knight d4, castle, knight c6, bishop c6. Okay. So the question is where to refute this bishop. All this is fine. This is just pretty much equal. These double pawns don't really hurt black because they control a lot of key squares. And also this half-open b-file helps black as well. So it's not really a weakness that these pawns are doubled, but white's fine too. So the question is where to put this bishop. And so d3 seems natural to help defend this pawn. But black has this very kind of standard idea to play knight to g4 to attack this bishop, and then to play bishop to f6 to get on this diagonal, and then to play knight to e5. So after bishop d3, black should have played knight g4 with the idea of bishop f6 and knight to e5. So the point is, the bishop, say this bishop moves someplace, bishop d2, you play rook b8, and now b3 is really not what you want to play because of bishop f6, and you put pressure on b2. And all of black's pieces are kind of on good squares now. Because this bishop is kind of black's worst piece, so if you can put it on this diagonal, it's great. And knight g4 makes it come with tempo, because you don't want to allow knight takes c3. So given that, this bishop should have retreated where? Well, you got to stop knight g4, so bishop e2 would have been correct. So bishop e2, and then it's just a game. Maybe even here, she could do something like rook e8, and then do something like this. Standard Ruy Lopez maneuver. Okay, but you play bishop d3, and again, knight g4 would have been good. d5 is kind of second best. E takes d5, you kind of helping her fix her pawn structure. Okay, now here you should castle, get your king safe. h3 is a waste of a move. h3 is a waste of a move. Because notice that this pawn is undefended if this knight moves. So for example, castle, knight g4, you can just take on d5. So you don't have to really worry about a piece coming on g4. So castling is preferable, because now after h3, she could have actually played c5 threatening d4. So you have to go bishop g5. And the other point of c5 is now it gives her bishop a nice hole on c6 to kind of come in. And now she's doing the same thing on c6 that she could have done on f6. She's going to play d4 and hit g2. So after castle, c4, bishop e2, d4, knight b1, bishop takes g2. So if king takes g2, queen d5 is a
check.
fork. Queen d5 doesn't work right away because of bishop f3. But bishop takes g2, bishop takes f6, bishop takes f1, bishop takes e7, bishop takes e2, queen takes e2, and rook e8. Kind of funny. So let me show you this line more slowly, but okay, so I'm taking a pawn. So again, if you take, I fork. So you take a knight. Okay, I take a rook. So right now I'm up on exchange. I'm up on exchange. Okay, now you have two pieces for the rook. Now I'm up in exchange. So if you take my queen, I'll take your queen. And now I'm up in exchange. So this is bad. So you take e2. Okay, I'm forked. Gotta do something about it. If I play queen e8, don't forget that this queen can actually... Or sorry, this rook is actually trapped. So I can just play knight a3. Whoops, sorry. Knight a3 and rook e1. Because this rook is trapped. So rook e8 is best. And then bishop takes d8. So you have to take the queen, rook takes e2. And now if you notice this position, it's actually really good for black. Because, okay, white has two pieces for the rook, but the problem is this knight can't get out. Because I'm threatening this. So you have to move your bishop. Bishop a5. And now c3 is very strong. Because if you take here, I'll take on b2, and then this is troublesome for you. And if you don't take, I'm going to play rook e1 and pin your knight. So for example, if you take, I play rook e1
check,
and rook b1, or rook b8, hitting the knight. And your knight's pinned, and if you take on, or if you play bishop b4 to try to block it, I can actually just take on c3. Because again, you can't take here, because because I'll take here. You can't take here because I'll take here. If you play a3, I can play a5. And again, you can't save it forever. So this is just good for black. That's kind of a far field. But the point was c5 with bishop c6 is very strong because there's these types of ideas. Okay, but she played rook e8 instead, which is a logical move, but not quite as incisive as c5. Castle, c5, okay, threatening d4. Threatening d4, so bishop g5. And now she should probably play bishop c6 again, get her bishop on a good square, threaten d4, and control the e4 square. Because now when she played d4 immediately, white had knight e4 possible. Actually, he took on f6 first, but by playing bishop c6 first, you keep the pawn duo intact, and you're only ready to move it when it's your turn to move it. Because really, white has no way to kind of disrupt the pawn duo with the knight on c3. So you want to kind of keep it on the same rank as long as possible until you're ready to move it forward. So she got a little hasty, and so take knight e4. So bishop e7 makes more sense just to keep the two bishops and to kind of dominate the knight. Rook c8 wasn't actually too bad of a mistake because knight d6, she had bishop g4, which is actually a cute move. So the point is you can't take either rook because I take your queen. And if you take my bishop, I'll just take your knight. But do you actually see white can win a pawn here? Do you guys see how white can win a pawn here? It's kind of tricky. So the way to win a pawn here is to play bishop takes h7.
Check.
The point is that if you take my bishop, I play queen d3 check.
Check.
Now you move your king someplace, and I take on e8. And now we're threatening two things. We're threatening this, and we're threatening this. So if you take on e8, I take here, I'll exchange. If you move your bishop someplace, I take on f6, I'll exchange. So you can't take on h7, because I win the exchange. So you have to play king to f8. But now I just win a pawn, because I just take on g4, you take on d6, and I play bishop back. Okay, it's still probably drawn opposite color bishops, but you can actually take that pawn. And it is free. And you don't want to go this way because this is even worse. Because now queen h5 is strong. This is bad news for white. Or for black. So bishop takes h7 was a clever way to win a pawn. He just took on g4 instead though. Took on d6, and this is just drawn. Rook fe1. A little trap he could have said is rook e1. So if rook takes rook, then of course queen takes c8 wins.
Check.
But okay, rook fe1 is fine too. Rook a1 is more trappy. Rook fe1, the problem is this is
check,
so there's no room to take this. But she shouldn't take anyway. And she didn't. She played c4, which is actually a mistake because you can take on c4. So she should just probably play something like rook e5. Or sorry, not rook e5. Not rook e5. Rook b8 first. Take b2. And then rook e5. Sorry. So anyway, she plays c4, which actually loses a pawn to attack it because he can just take. And now if she takes on c4, rook takes e8, it wins. So rook takes e1, rook takes e1, and still can't take here because here. This is attack though, so she has to move it. Queen c6 was fine. Queen e4, again, same tricks. If queen takes c4, queen e8 is mate. And if take, and again, you can't take on c4 because rook e8 is mate. So everything is still working. g6, good move. Queen takes c6, rook takes c6. Okay, so he played bishop d3 here. He should probably play b3 to keep an eye on this, but we'll go from this position. Okay, so in this position, white played b4 and accepted a draw. So it's a little tricky because I mean objectively this is probably close to a draw, but I mean only white can win because white's up a pawn, right? So if you were white, how would you try to win this is the question. So the first order of business is b4 is not a good move. b4 is what was played, but it's not a good move. The problem is that you're really weakening your pawn structure because now this pawn on c2 is fixed. So black can play rook c3 and this bishop has to stay on c4 forever. This bishop belongs on c4, or this bishop belongs on or stays on d3 forever. It belongs on c4. So let's actually go back to the position where he should have played b3 and pretend this happened. Okay, so how does white try to win this? So So the way White tries to win this is first he needs to get his rook active. It's on an open file, but it needs to create targets. So he needs to first go something like this. Rook e8, rook b8, and rook b7. That way he's attacking this and this. Then he needs to bring his king in. So king here, king here, king here, maybe. And now he needs to either somehow combine threats on this pawn and on this pawn to maybe bring his king somehow like this way and try to win this pawn. Because this bishop is actually quite bad due to this pawn on d4. It's hard for the bishop to kind of look at both sides of the board. So for example, after rook e8, say rook c7, rook b8, I don't know, rook e7, a4. Oh, you can't play a4 because rook e1, so I guess maybe g3 first. And then try to get out via f3. So she goes back and forth. Back and forth. Like, well, maybe now she plays h5. Okay, so now a4. Say she moves her king someplace. Okay, so eventually what you can try to do is, like, fix this pawn on a7. So, like, a5 and a6. Oops. And then, like, rook b7, for example. So you're not actually threatening anything. Because, you know, well, actually, you're threatening to take on f7, I guess. So here, but now you can go like b4, b5, b6, and try to queen this pawn. So there's ways to try to win this. I mean, if black is super vigilant, probably it's a draw, but white kind of has ways to try to win this. And it involves getting the rook active and trying to attack this f pawn, and then maybe trying to create a pass pawn with these 2 versus 1, because this bishop doesn't have a good way to get back there. So anyway, that'll be it for this one.